Welcome back, fight fans. Today we're counting down the 10 biggest underdog wins in UFC history. Those rare nights where Vegas had it one way and the cage had a completely different story to tell. These are the fights that remind you anything can happen. Remember, this is my list. If you think one was a fluke, let me know below. Either way, make sure to like and subscribe. Let's get started. At number 10, we got Frankie Edgar defeating PJ Penn at UFC 112 in Abu Dhabi back in 2010. At the time, PJ Penn was the lightweight king, flat out untouchable. He had lost at 155 in nearly a decade. He wasn't just winning, he was absolutely dominating. He was coming over statement wins over Diego Sanchez, Kenny Florian, Sean Shrek, all lopsided, all classic prodigy performances. Across him stood Frankie Edgar, the scrappy, undersized Jersey kid known for his gas tank, crisp boxing, and a massive heart. Nobody doubted he was good, but almost nobody thought he could dethrone Penn. Oddsmaker had him as high as plus 600 underdog, and that felt generous to some. From the first round, Frankie refused to stand still. He was constantly circling, jabbing, darting in and out, and making Penn reset over and over. Every time PJ tried to plant and counter, Edgar was gone. It wasn't flashy, it was exhausting to fight. By round 4, Penn's frustration showed. His timing was gone, his gas tank completely fading, and Frankie's pace was just never dipping. When the scores were red and Buffer called out and knew, you could see the disbelief on Penn's face. Dana White later admitted he was stunned. Fans were divided. Some cried robbery, but most knew that what they saw. The UFC gave Penn an immediate rematch just 5 months later, and Edgar beat him even cleaner. That night in Abu Dhabi was the new start of an era. Frankie Edgar didn't just win a belt, he redefined what speed, cardio, and discipline could do in MMA. Now, at number 9, we got Rose Namajunas defeating Joanna Jędrzejczyk at UFC 217 in New York City in 2017. Heading into that night at Madison Square Garden, Joanna was a machine, unbeaten and known for weaponizing volume. She teared through opponents with sharp jabs, low kicks, and relentless pressure. People weren't wondering if she'd win, they were debating how fast. Across her stood Rose Namajunas, soft-spoken, calm, almost zen-like. Fans respected her skills, but few thought she was ready for a queen at 115. She walked around at plus 400 underdog against a champion who looked absolutely unbeatable. But from the opening bell, Rose's composure told a different story. She wasn't intimidated. She stood her ground, stood behind her jabs, timed her counters perfectly. Every time Joanna rushed forward with her unusual furies, Rose would plant her feet and fire something straight and clean right down the middle. Halfway through the first round, it happened. Rose caught her flush with the left hook that sent Joanna crashing down. And just like that, the undefeated reign was over. The crowd exploded, and then came the unforgettable moment. Joe Rogan stepped in with the mic, and Rose, with tears in her eyes, said softly, "We're all just trying to be better people." Dana called it one of the biggest upsets in women's MMA. Joanna was gracious in defeat and got her rematch, but Rose beat her again, proving it was no fluke. That night in New York, the calmest person in the building walked out with the belt. At number 8, we have Henry Cejudo defeating Demetrius Johnson at UFC 227 in Los Angeles in 2018. Now, I gotta say, Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson is by far my favorite fighter of all time. So even years later, this one still hurts. At that point, DJ was the most complete fighter the UFC had ever seen. 11 straight title defenses, every win looking easier than the last. His fight IQ, transition, and speed made him look like he was in a completely different sport. And then there was Henry Cejudo, Olympic gold medalist, great credentials, but already finished by DJ 2 years prior. Nobody thought he'd fix that gap. Johnson opened as a huge favorite, somewhere around minus 600, while Henry was about plus 425. But from the jump, Cejudo fought like a man who refused to repeat history. His time-short level change still moments with takedowns and make DJ work off his back foot, something few ever managed. Johnson was landing, but Cejudo was banking rounds. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't dominant, but it was smart, the kind of disciplined fight that wins titles. When a split decision was read in Henry's favor, the building gasped. Fans argued for months, half saying DJ got robbed, the other half calling it the end of an era. Even Dana White looked stunned. But within months, the UFC had traded DJ to one championship, and Henry Cejudo went on to become Triple C, grabbing another belt at bantamweight. It was the night Mighty Mouse's legendary reign finally ended, and the night Henry Cejudo's legacy began. Next up, at number 7, we got Sean Strickland defeating Israel Adesanya at UFC 293 in Sydney, Australia, and only a few years ago in 2023. Now, this one still feels very recent and surreal. Izzy had just reclaimed his middleweight title with a knockout over none other than Alex Pereira. It was once again being talked about one of the best strikers on earth. His timing, feints, and setups made him look untouchable. Sean Strickland, he's just seen as a solid gatekeeper, maybe even a journeyman. Good boxing, forward pressure, not nearly dominant enough to outstrike Izzy. The books had Adesanya anywhere from minus 600 to 750, and Sean as high as plus 500 underdog. And then Strickland did what nobody thought was possible. No tricks, no surprise, and absolutely no chaos, just discipline. He walked Izzy down behind that high guard, barely flinching at feints, and drive his way straight into Adesanya's comfort zone. His defense was airtight. Izzy couldn't bait him into counters, couldn't find the kicks, couldn't find the angles. By round 2, Strickland even dropped the champion with the clean right hand. And from there, he never let go. When the final horn sounded, everyone in the arena knew Sean Strickland had just outboxed one of the best technical strikers in UFC history. Dana White called it one of the craziest nights I've ever seen. Adesanya didn't even argue the result. Fans online were calling it the biggest tactical upset since Syria GSP. Now, we'll get to that in a little bit. And the best part, Sean didn't win with luck. He won with fundamentals. And at number 6, we got Joanna Penne versus none other than Amanda Nunes at UFC 269 in Las Vegas in 2021. Before this fight, Amanda Nunes was the women's GOAT, the double champ, the destroyer of divisions. Every fight felt like a foregone conclusion. She'd beaten Valentina, Cyborg, Ronda, Hallie. There was nobody left to challenge her. Penne, though, had different plans. She had been calling for this fight for years, saying, "I know how to beat her." Fans laughed, including myself. Analysis dismissed it. The odds maker had Amanda at minus 1,000. Penne's around plus 700. And round 1 looked like everyone was right. Nunes landed big and controlled the pace early. But when round 2 started, Penne met her in the center and just started throwing. She jabbed with her and traded with her, and Amanda's gas tank started to empty. You could see it, her arms dropping, mouth open. Penne kept pressuring, dragging her down, and even took her back. The crowd erupted, and she locked in the choke. Dana White's face said it all. Pure shock. Social media blew up instantly. Nobody could believe it. Penne had just pulled one of the biggest upsets in UFC history. They ran it back a few months later, and Nunes dominated to take the belt back. But that night at UFC 269, Joanna Penne became the woman who made the impossible happen. Now at number 5, we have none other than Nate Diaz defeating Conor McGregor at UFC 196 in Las Vegas 2016. This one's a legend. At the time, Conor McGregor was the biggest name in combat sport. He just knocked out Jose Aldo in 13 seconds. And with moving to face Rafael dos Anjos for the lightweight title, so RDA got hurt. In stepped in none other than Nate Diaz on just 11 days notice, straight off vacation, and a diet of, well, whatever he felt like. Nobody expected him to win. The odds were stacked, with Conor sitting around minus 500 and Nate a hefty underdog. Conor came out hot, landing clean lefts and lining up the crowd. But Diaz, as he always does, stayed calm. He took the shots, wore that classic Stockton grin, and kept walking forward. By the second round, McGregor's pace kept up with him. Nate started landing clean. The jab, the 1-2, the clinch knees. Then the left rocked him, and the tide completely turned. Diaz swarmed, got it to the mat, and when Conor gave up his back, man, that black belt Nate Diaz sunk in the choke. Crowd went insane. Joe Rogan yelled, and then Nate dropped one of the greatest post-fight lines in UFC history. "I'm not surprised, motherfuckers." The reaction was massive. Even Dana looked stunned. But to his credit, Conor owned it. He demanded the rematch, and 2 ran it back at UFC 202 delivering another classic. But the first fight, that's when Nick Diaz went from cult favorite to global superstar. At number 4, we got Holly Holm defeating Ronda Rousey at UFC 193 in Melbourne, Australia in 2015. This wasn't just a fight, this was a cultural moment. Ronda Rousey was the face of women's MMA, undefeated, unstoppable, finishing everyone in under a minute. Talk shows, she had magazine covers, movie deals, she was absolutely everywhere. Holly Holm, meanwhile, was a quiet former boxing world champion. 2-0 in the UFC, respected, but not seen as ready for the queen. The odds were wild. Ronda was around minus 1,500, while Holly was near plus 1,000. From the opening bell, it was flawless. Ronda's power hand and used kicks and straight lefts to control the range. Every time Ronda tried to close the distance or clinch, Holly slipped out and reset. You could see the frustration on Rousey's face. This wasn't supposed to happen. Then earlier round 2, Holly landed the head kick heard around the world. Ronda went down instantly. Silence and then chaos. 56,000 fans in Australia losing their mind. Dana White called it the biggest upset in UFC history. Ronda didn't handle it well. She disappeared from the spotlight for over a year. Holland became an overnight star, but she lost her first defense to Miesha Tate a few months later. Still, that night in Melbourne, Holly Holm reminded everyone that technique, patience, beat hype and fury. At number 3, we got Michael Bisping defeating Luke Rockholm at UFC 199 in England, California, 2016. For over a decade, Bisping was the guy who got close. Top 10 mainstay, great wins, but never a title belt holder. Luke Rockholm, meanwhile, had been beating him once. It looked like the future of the division. When Chris Weidman got injured, Bisping stepped in on just 17 days' notice. Oddsmaker gave him no chance. Rockholm was around minus 900. Bisping roughly plus 600. But from the start, something felt different. Bisping was intense. He was loose, confident, joking out weigh-ins. He knew Rockholm leaned straight back with his chin up. And in round 1, he made him pay for it. A short left hook caught Luke clean on the jaw, dropped him, and Bisping never let him recover. The follow-up shot sealed it, and just like that, Michael Bisping, after 10 long years in UFC, was the middleweight champion. The form erupted. Rockholm looked stunned. Dana called it one of the most emotional title wins he's ever seen. Bisping's reaction said it all. Disbelief, tears, and that trademark smirk. From journeyman to champion in over a night. At number 2, we got Chris Weidman defeating Anderson Silva at UFC 162 at Las Vegas in 2013. There was no bigger name in the MMA than Anderson Silva. The Spider had ruled middleweight for nearly 7 years. Effortless, creative, and absolutely lethal. People showed up to watch how he'd win, not if he'd win. Chris Weidman, on the other hand, was just 9-0 and wrestled with good hands but untested at this level. His confidence, but most fans saw him as the next name on Anderson's highlight reel. Weidman opened the fight by threatening with takedowns, keeping Silva cautious. But when Anderson started taunting him, dropping his hands with head movements, daring Weidman to swing, Chris didn't bite. He stayed patient, stuck to his plan, but when Silva leaned back one too many times, likely mocking Weidman, he found that left hook under the chin. Silva went down and the world stopped. The MGM Grand was silent for a second before absolutely erupting. Joe Rogan's voice even cracked. Dana called it the end of an era. They ran it back 6 months later, but Anderson snapped his leg on a checked kick, sealing the torch-passing moment. For years, fans joked about Silva's clowning, but that night, Chris Weidman proved that he was the real deal. And at number 1, the gold standard of all upsets, Matt Serra defeating GSP at UFC 69 in Austin, Houston, Texas, back in 2007. Back then, Georges St. Pierre was becoming a prototype for the modern fighter. Sharp jab, laser focus, elite wrestling, and a discipline of a machine. He just dominated Matt Hughes and looked unstoppable. Matt Serra, meanwhile, was coming off the Ultimate Fighter, the Comeback Series, where he earned this title shot. A feel-good story, sure, but almost nobody thought he'd stand a chance. The betting odds were comical. GSP around minus 1,300, Sierra at plus 850. And then it happened. Midway through the first round, Sierra clipped GSP with a loping right that sent him stumbling. But instead of rushing wild, Sierra stayed calm, cutting off the cage, landing clean combinations, and never smothering his own power. He kept catching GSP until the ref stepped in. The crowd in Houston went absolutely insane. Joe Rogan couldn't believe what he was watching. Dana White called it the biggest upset he'd ever seen. Period. GSP handled it like a champion. Took a rematch a year later in Montreal and dominated Sierra to get his belt back. But that night, April 7th, 2007, Matt Sierra shocked the world. It's still the ultimate underdog story. The moment that reminds every fan, every fighter, that nobody is untouchable. And that's the list. My 10 fights that changed everything. If you ever cash in an underdog ticket on one of those fights, let me know in the comments. I love hearing those stories. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit subscribe and drop a like and share this with a friend who swore one of those fights were a fluke.